later, right?
You can share your slides now if you want.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I cannot disable
Oh,
participant screen sharing.
okay, now you should be able to.
Okay, let me,
Beautiful. Yep, I can see them.
there.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'll give folks a minute or two to log on before we get started with our very exciting presentation today. And I'll also wait about a minute before I start the introduction. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the introduction, and then while people continue to log on. So today we are very excited to have Dr. Marina Bers from Tufts University as our speaker. She's a professor and the chair of the Eliot-Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development, and also has an appointment in computer science. And she also heads up an interdisciplinary team, developmental technologies research group. She does really exciting research in computer science and robotics in early childhood, and is one of the most prominent and leading scholars in this area of work. She's got many prestigious awards in her career, the Presidential Early Career Award for Science and Engineering, National Science Foundation Young Investigator Career Award, AERA Jan Hawkins Early Award for career contributions to humanistic research and scholarship and learning technologies. So a groundbreaking scholar, I think, in this field, and does a really awesome and applied work where you'll hear all about it, but doing robotics and coding with young kids and sparking an early passion for these things, and breaking down some of the stigma about who can do robotics and who can do computer science. And so I'm really excited for the talk. And so let me also just say the Q&A, please use the Q&A feature to type your questions in for the end of the session, and I'll moderate and read those questions. And also we want to create a culture of hearing from students. And so if you're a student, please put a little asterisk or a student in parentheses or something, so I can prioritize your questions first. And so without further ado, Dr. Bers, please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Andres. It's wonderful to be here. And you're all seeing my screen, and let's just start. So, as Andres mentioned, I direct the DevTech Research Group at Tufts University. And what I thought I'll do first is just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we do at DevTech. So we develop products, and the most well-known are Scratch Junior, which is a collaboration with Mitch Resnick at the MIT Media Lab, and Keyboard Robot, which I'll tell you more about it, but right now it's used in 61 countries. And we also have some prototypes. What you see here is called Crispy. And I particularly say products because, as Andres mentioned, we are very interested in applied research. And if they're just demos or prototypes, you don't get to use them with lots of people. And so a lot of our research is how to go from a prototype to actually a product. We also develop pedagogical theories and approaches because technology is not enough. You want technologies to be used in the right way, in a way that's developmentally appropriate for young children. And we do research, traditional research, from working in classrooms to developing curriculum and seeing impact, to more innovative research, such as looking at what happens on the brain when people are coding. And we do brain scans and things like that. And we do a big piece for us is doing outreach. So we do professional development. We work in many countries and schools and children. And so that's what we do at DevTech and a research group. We're around 20 or so individual staffs, undergrad, grad students, research scientists. So I know we are all on a virtual format, and this is going to be really hard, but I trust Andres will help me here. So if we were all face to face, I will say, raise your hand and let me know which of these objects do you think is out of place? Which one doesn't fit into these ecosystems of objects and why? And maybe, Andres, you can get people to help, or otherwise you'll be on the spot.
Oh, we have a nominee from the chat. The robot plushie, says Lena.
Yes. So why the robot plushie? Is the nominee typing?
I think so. Let's give. It doesn't function, says Lena.
Okay, Lina, you're very close, and actually, that's it. It doesn't function mean there's no electronics. So you're obviously very interested in these topics, and you're smart, and you got it the first time. Usually, when I give this talk, what I hear is the one that doesn't fit is the water, the faucet, because there's water, right? And that's wrong, obviously. So all of these objects, except the plushie, have an electronics component. So they were all programmed. They were all designed, right? Because the plushie was also designed, but the plushie did not include an electronics component. And the world in which we're growing and the world of the future is a world in which we're having more and more electronic components into our everyday objects. And if there's an electronic component, it means it was programmed. And if it was programmed, it means there was a programmer. So that gets me to this guy here. His name is Seymour Papert, and here's a picture of him in 1967. I never met him at this point. I wasn't born yet. But he's very well known for having developed the Logo programming language, and he's being credited as the father of programming for young children. So I was lucky that Seymour, when I came to study at the MIT Media Lab, he was my advisor. And the reason I bring him is because back in the 60s, he was already talking about the importance of teaching computer science and robotics to children. We're talking about 1967. And this is Logo, the first version of Logo, where there was a turtle that you program to go forward, to turn right, to go forward and right. And you could be learning mathematics in an applied way, at the same time to think in abstract and logical ways. And he also believed that you learn with your body and not just by being what we're doing right now in front of a screen. So along with Logo on the screen, he developed the Logo turtle on the floor. They came together. They were really together. And of course, ideas are more important than technology. So this is the book that he wrote in 1980 called Mindstorms, where he really explained how this technology could be used for children for having powerful ideas. And keep this idea in mind, powerful ideas, because I'll come back to all of this in my talk. And I'll tell you about the powerful ideas on my own research. So Simon actually was frustrated at some point because he felt that he was well known for his technology, but not necessarily for his ideas. And it was very important to get ideas out into the world. Some of these ideas influence what you see here. You know, this is the earlier version of the Lego Mindstorms robotic system. And if you didn't know, this is called Mindstorms in honor of Seymour Paper's book that was called Mindstorms. I was lucky enough to be at the Media Lab when we, as grad students, were developing the first versions of Lego Mindstorms that at the time was a red brick, it wasn't yellow. And one of the reasons I came to Tufts is because Tufts was working with Lego as well and different versions of Lego. So it felt naturally to come to Tufts. So we're talking about 1960s, right? However, if you look at the newspapers today, right, you see that coding is everywhere. All over the world, people are saying we need to introduce coding. Code.org, Hour of Code, not just in the US, but all over. But, you know, it's nothing new. So why? Why it's happening now? Well, because of this, right? There's an understanding that computing is going to grow and we need people in computing jobs. And the red that you see there is the growing field of computer science. And you see how the projected employment growth in computer science is a lot bigger than any other area of STEM, not even talking about other areas that are outside STEM. And that's wonderful and that's fantastic. However, that's not why I do the work I do. And what I came to tell you today is why I do the work I do and how. So I work with little kids. They look like this, in case you forgot what a 4 or 5 year old looks like. And they're not thinking about their jobs when they're going to grow up, right? They are not, these kids are not in preparation for a future job. These kids are here now today, developing new ways of thinking, new ways of interacting, new ways of asking questions and relating to the world. So if we're going to bring computer science and coding and robotics, it's for today, not just to prepare them for the future. It's because we believe that these children can learn to think in new ways. And if they learn how to think in new ways, they will be able to problem solve, not just today, but the problems of tomorrow that we don't know what those are. There's also other reasons of why we want to work with younger kids. This is taken from a graph by Jim Heckman, who won a Nobel laureate a couple of years ago. And he's shown with colleagues that any programs that you target the earliest years, there's more return in your investment. So if you really want to have an impact on a country, really start as early as you can. Don't wait until middle school and high school, which is traditionally when we start seeing computer science being introduced. It's late, right? Let's start early. So there are both cognitive um, reasons for why we want to start early, and there are also economic reasons for why we want to start early. The question is how? How do we start early? These 4 and 5 year old children obviously do not know how to write, do not know how to read. So our interfaces need to be different. And the way we teach them needs to be different because they have the different developmental needs. So that's what my research is all about. And that's what I'll be sharing with you today. And I talk about 4 powerful ideas. Ideas bring innovation, right? And hopefully these 4 ideas will inspire you in your own work, and maybe you'll come up with your own ideas. So there are 4 of them, and I will present them at the beginning. And then as I continue the talk, I will ask you to maybe write them down and see in all the different projects that I will be showing you which ideas play out and how. I'll be showing you lots of videos, lots of different things. I will not come back to these ideas. So remember those ideas and see where they fit in the work I show you. So idea number 1, coding is a playground. And I know, for example, that Andres does a lot of work with playgrounds. In this case, we're talking about a coding playground. And if you think about a playground, in case you forgot, lots of things happen in this playground. You have children running around, you have children talking with each other, children fighting with each other, children imagining, creating, collaborating. The adults are usually on the benches and they let children resolve things on their own. If there's a big problem, then they intervene. But children are autonomous, they're agents of their own doing, of their own learning. And I used to joke in Child Development 101 class that all dimensions of human development can be observed in the playground. You have social development, cognitive development, language development, moral development. Should I, cut the line or not cut the line? Of course, motor development. Any area is here. So now contrast this metaphor, this playground, and we're going to contrast it with this. This is a playpen, and the playpen is almost the opposite than the playground. It's very limited. Usually a child is alone, cannot escape, and you get to play with what the adult gives you. The adult chooses the toys and you get to play, and usually you want to get out of it, right? If you've ever seen a little kid in a play. Of course, it's safe. It's very safe. So if I need to go cook, I can leave the child there for 15 minutes, I come back. However, in the playground, my child would definitely want to stay for 2 hours, right? They want to stay more and more. So of course, from a learning perspective, we'd rather have children in a playground and not in a playpen. Well, unfortunately, most technologies are there for young children are playpens. They are not playgrounds. These playpens look such as, toys that you learn the letters or you repeat numbers, and they're fine for 15 minutes. but they are not really offer the full potential. And when we think about coding, it's about creating worlds, it's about imagining, it's about fantasy, and you can stay a long time there. So I'm using the coding versus playpen as a metaphor because the technologies will constantly change. What I will show you today, in 10 years, it will look so old, like that little turtle from Logo. However, this metaphor, playground versus playpen, will stay. And usually when I work with teachers, I tell them, if you don't know, someone is trying to sell you a technology, for your classroom, have it pass through the playground versus playpen test. Is it a playground? You probably want to learn more about it. If it's a playpen, just be aware. Maybe you want it for a specific use, but just don't get confused. It's not a playground, it's a playpen. So that's idea number one. In the playground, we see a lot of these behaviors: communication, collaboration, community building, creativity, content creation, and choices of conduct, right? And in more theoretical terms, I coined the term positive technological development for describing these kinds of behaviors that we can find in my neighborhood playground, in Andres' playground, as well as in the coding playground. And I want to show you how the theoretical framework works. I will do it quick, but if anyone is interested, I can point you to where you can read more about it. So if we're thinking about a personal developmental trajectory within a sociocultural context, we think about behaviors, and these are the 6 C's: communication, collaboration, community building, content creation, creativity, choices of conduct. So those behaviors are related to assets that the field of positive youth development has explored for many decades. The question that positive youth development asks is, what are the assets, the personal assets, the characteristics that children who thrive in life, not just that get the best scores, that children who thrive in life have? And they came up with this list of 6 C's. They also call it the 6 C's. And so my work is, how can we design new tools, new technologies to help the assets become behaviors and the behaviors promote assets? And that's interplay. And my work is very applied. So when you look at a classroom practice, this framework doesn't translate literally because we have, every classroom has its own learning culture, its own values, its own way of doing things. And therefore, we want to be when we work with classrooms and with teachers, we say, well, some of these practices that we recommend to promote some of the C's might not apply in your own classroom or might need to be changed. So part of the work that we do in professional development for teachers is to help them complete this box of the classroom practice on their own, based on their own culture and values and needs. So that's the framework. And based on this PTD framework, all of the technologies that I'll be showing you were designed based on this, based on these 6 C's, positive technological development. So here's a little bit of an example. And this is in a classroom in China, in Beijing. These are 4-year-olds programming with Kibo. This is, the robot that we developed. There are no screens. If you see, there have wooden blocks that have commands, and the child is scanning the commands. And here you see. So what you saw here is our coding playground. So where kids started to learn coding and sequence and abstraction by creating a code, putting together those wooden blocks to make a dance, to recreate the hokey pokey, which is a very structured dance. There's a reason why it's a hokey pokey and not something else. But this is what a coding class or a coding playground looks like. Idea number 1. Idea number 2, coding as another language. So I'm gonna make it very simple. In the work we do, coding is really taken as what it is learning the syntax and the grammar of an artificial language as opposed to a natural language for expression, to be able to communicate, to be able to create something to express ourselves. In that process, we problem solve, But problem solving is not the end goal, right? So in that sense, we differentiate ourselves a little bit from STEM. While STEM work really focuses on problem solving, we use problem solving as a way to get to something else. And actually, if you think about how literacy evolves with little children, you forgot because you're all good at reading and writing. But there was a lot of problem solving when you were first learning the alphabet and to read and to write. So let's take particular case of where coding is really placed as another language. If you look at sequencing, so the basic of coding is creating a sequence of commands, an algorithm, where there is order and order matters. First I do this, then I do that. And it could be done with wooden blocks, like in the case of Kibo. It could be done with symbols, like Scratch Junior. But it can also happen when I create a story. There's the beginning, a middle, and end, or when I follow commands for brushing my teeth, right? So sequencing, which is at the heart of programming at this age range, is found always in storytelling. And what we really want is children, the same way that they are able to express themselves with different languages. The idea is that as you grow, you'll be able to learn how to express yourself with different languages, programming languages. And we all know that if you learn a language as a kid, your first, second language as a kid is much easier to learn a third and a fourth. And so is it similar? Is it different if you learn, for example, keyboard robots or Scratch Junior when you're a kid? Are the cognitive structures in place so then you can learn as you grow other languages? Third idea, coding as a bridge. And if we understand that coding or our coding playground is a place where we use language for expression, the minute we're talking about language, we're already talking about relationships, and we're already talking about people, and we're already talking about two beings that need to communicate. And in that sense, the way we understand coding is an opportunity for establishing personal relationships, and not only for establishing relationships with an object. And I don't want to get too complicated, but there is a philosopher, Martin Buber, that's wonderful and I highly recommend, who one of his books is called I Thou. And he really talks about the types of relationships that we can establish. Some are I Thou, person to person, and some are I It, person to technology. But the technology can sometimes be another, the it can be a technology, but it can be another human being. Sometimes we relate to people as if they were not people. And so the idea is in the coding playground, we want to really use coding as a way to reinforce social emotional aspects of learning as well. And here's a little project. We've been working for the last 2 years in a project in both Argentina and Boston with schools that are Jewish, Muslim, Catholic, and secular schools, where they all came together and learned robotics, and the teachers trained together and they established bridges that they never thought they had. And this is a little video clip of the kids in Argentina. This is a kindergarten classroom where they explore all where they came from, the different countries where they came from, and they program their keyboards to come to Argentina with the current of immigration. So I want to show it's very cute. So what you see there written, it says, we're all different, but we came together to learn. And so this is one of the resulting projects for this project idea. And then the last one, the last powerful idea is this coding as a palette of virtues. So if you are coding, if you are doing any activity, really, you have an opportunity to do it with intention. And in the coding playground, you always see what I call these 10 virtues or values in a palette. So what we want is open-mindedness, curiosity, perseverance, forgiveness, gratitude, and so forth, patience. And we like, I coined this, the idea of the metaphor. I like metaphors. So the idea of a palette of virtues, because like an artist that you mix and match different colors and you create your own paint, it's the same thing with coding. And if you're a teacher and you're aware of that these are the values or the virtues that you want to have in your classroom, again, you might mix them, you might incorporate new ones, you might get rid of all, It's yours, it's your own palette, but there is an universality to it. And also it reminds us that coding is a creative activity. It's something that you put, it's the activity, but it's also who you are that come together. And so I like this metaphor of the coding as a palette of virtues. So those are the 4 ideas, and those 4 ideas come all of my work. And you'll see an example of how a 4-year-old classroom has displayed this palette of virtues. So they are trying to program keyboards and they can't figure it out, right? So, oops. They're trying to figure out how to do it. And there's a lot of turn taking. You cannot understand what they're saying. I can't either. But you can see in their behaviors. So let me stop there. I don't know when was your last time in a 4-year-old classroom, but what you see here is the result of a long time of working in this particular context. You see children respecting each other, taking turns, exploring together. If you're a grown-up, you do this naturally. If you're a 4-year-old, it doesn't come naturally. It's something that you work towards. And that's the kind of palette of virtues shown to its best, right? So this teacher was not just teaching them Kibo, was teaching them an approach to social emotional learning and development as well. So if you want to learn more about this is the 2nd edition of my book, just came out. The first one was published 2018, but it went really fast. So this is the 2nd edition. I invite you to look at it. And we also have my papers as PDF. So you don't have to buy the book. You can just go to my website and you'll have lots of papers there. So now let's get to the interesting, cool thing that I always do at the end, because if I start with the technology, people just want to know about technology. And I feel it's really important to start with ideas. So these are the 2 technologies that we work in my lab and we're very proud of. They're both funded with National Science Foundation grant, Scratch Junior and Kibo. And I'll be telling you about both of them. So first, let's start with Kibo, which is the closest to a playground, right? Because there is the physical component. And so Kibo is this little robot. You can attach sensors to it that look like it looks like a telescope, a distance sensor. It looks like an eye. That's a light sensor. It looks like an ear. It's a sound sensor, a light bulb. And you program with wooden blocks. The wooden blocks have letters that you might or might not know how to read. They have symbols and they have a barcode that the keyboard robot can read through here. But of course, the keyboard robot is not finished until you bring the arts and crafts, because in every early childhood classroom, you want to have arts and crafts and imagination. And so there's a platform for you to make this keyboard into anything you want. And once you become a pro, like this 4-year-old, this is how you do your scanning. And not only you can scan your own very, very long sequence, but you can help someone else. This is very typical of a child who feels they know Kibo. They create a very, very long sequence because that's what kids do. They want the longest, the biggest, and so forth. The approach that we work in all our curriculum, it's learning by design. So we help children ask questions, imagine possibilities, plan for approaches. I'm mindful I'm not using the traditional engineering terms. Pay attention to that. You plan, you create, you test and improve your creation, you share it with others, and you have new questions, and you imagine, and it's an infinite loop because this process happens constantly. And then this also, in a good early childhood classroom, we want this to happen constantly. And what process is that? What are we, again, I cannot see you, but maybe can someone type it in the chat? What are we talking here? What is the process of doing what?
Somebody says writing in the
Exactly, it's a writing process. And early childhood classrooms have something that's called the writer's workshop. And this is all that they do, right? And so it's very well aligned. So when we work with schools, we say, you know what, the way you teach writing, it's similar to how you teach coding, and we will integrate. And some people say, well, but I do this. And what is this? The last one. What process is this?
Science.
Exactly, the scientific process. It's also well aligned. And if I keep going with the arts process and the business plan process, and you give me your profession, I'll make it fit into the process. Because that's how we learn. We learn by processes of iteration. It's so different. Well, we don't learn by having a grade and that's it. We learn by having the ability to constantly learn and relearn and revise. So I want to show you a couple of very short clips of how we integrate. We don't teach coding as a standalone discipline. We always integrate it into classrooms. So with literacy, you know this book, very well known. It's a little caterpillar that's very hungry. So the children read the book, and then instead of making a drawing of it, they program their keyboards to recreate the story of the caterpillar. So you see the caterpillar going and eating the different foods. And what you don't see there is that how did the caterpillar know when to stop, right? So there are different approaches. They could do it by counting the steps. There's math. They could do it by using a sensor to detect. In this case, they didn't. You can see there's no sensors attached. There's always multiple solutions to a problem. Here's another one, and this is in honor of logo, the geometry art that I showed you before. So you can attach pens and start creating geometry drawing with your keyboard. And this is one of my favorite curriculum units. It's a social science curriculum where we look at the different dances around the world. It's called Dances Around the World. And children have to go back to their families, interview the families, where do they come from, what kind of dances they do, what kind of costumes they use. They look at them, they listen to the music, they count the beats, and then they come back and they do things like such as this. So you have some salsa, you also have some group dances. So that clip is actually take number 20, because if I show you 19, 18, they were all crashing against each other. So I only show you the product, not the process. The most interesting is the process. Children had to estimate, they had to coordinate, it was a group. It's really, really hard. And what you saw, the little skirts are coffee filters. And then I'm from Argentina, so let's see who can guess what the next dance I'm gonna show you. I had to show you this one. What dance do you think is it gonna be? Do we have any guesses?
Daniel says tango.
Daniel, you are absolutely right. So what you saw there is actually was done by teachers during one of our professional developments. There's a lot of, it's hard, right? It's hard to make this work. So right now, Kibo, it was a fantastic journey. I started as a, prototype in my lab, and we worked really hard through an NSF grant. And then I was able to secure another NSF grant that's called SBIR, which is for small business, which are really, really hard to get. And I was able to get one. And a friend of mine who actually had retired from being a Kiva system, which is Kiva Systems was sold to Amazon, and he made a lot of money and he was just planning to retire and do nothing. And I convinced him to help me and create a company. I said, I don't want to do anything in the company. I just want the idea. You will be the CEO, but I cannot pay you. But I bring the grant. And so I secured this grant through SBIR, and my friend Mitch Rosenberg is the CEO of the company, and the company, which is Kinderlab Robotics, is able to commercialize Kibo, and right now is in 61 countries. So it's really fantastic. And this person that you see here is the Minister of Education of Singapore, because a few years ago, Singapore approached me saying that they believe in early childhood education, and they believe that if they wanted to have a smart nation, they needed to have smart kids. So they wanted a Kibo in every single preschool. So I was very lucky to work with them. And one of the units was about dances around the world. So these are kids in Singapore. So what you see there is the parents who came to the final performance. Instead of having robotic competitions, we have robotic performances where children present the dances from around the world. What the little boy was doing is they document their code. We teach them to document. So they had little stickers, and that's why he was following the stickers. If you know, he's 4, he doesn't know multiplication, but repeat 4 times 2, he was talking, he was understanding the idea of multiplication, the idea, without understanding the concept. So also a few years ago, Argentina, my hometown, my home country, decided to bring Kibo in every kindergarten in the city of Buenos Aires. And the first project that I show you about immigration came from there. And it was a fantastic experience. And so Kibo is there, it's great. However, Kibo is expensive because it's a robot. And as a robot, you have to buy it, right? And it's not it's a small little company, so it is expensive because it's all grant money, right? That it's not we cannot mass produce. If we were able to mass produce, it would be a lot cheaper. So Scratch Junior uses some of the same ideas, but it's free. And I just wanted to make sure that what comes of my lab is also accessible to everyone, regardless if you have money or not. And so Scratch Junior is a collaboration with Mitch Resnick from the MIT Media Lab, and also an SF-funded grant. Let me show you a little bit what it looks like, and then we'll talk about it. So you open Scratch Junior, you can choose the background, or you can draw your own background, or you can take a picture of something and make that into your background. I'm going to choose a plant. And now I can choose a character for my background, again from a library, or I can make my own. I'm going to choose a frog. They really like plants. And now I'm going to program my frog. When the green flag is pressed, I'm going to have my frog hop twice, grow twice, shrink twice. I'm going to record the sound, place my sound into my sequence, repeat this sequence 4 times, and I'm going to end my program. And now I'm going to click the green flag, and you can see my frog following this command. I didn't have to read or write. And then I can create new pages for my story. I can include a grid to look at XY coordinates, and I can use a text. So that's the basic of Scratch Junior. It's very simple. It's an introductory programming language for young kids. So, I mentioned Lifelong Kindergarten, Mitch Resnick, and the Playful Invention Company who helped us. And originally was funded by National Science Foundation, and now it's funded by the Scratch Foundation, who allows us to keep it up. So if you're familiar with Scratch, which is developed for children 8 and up, if you want to make a jumping frog, this is what you do. But with Scratch Junior, this is what you do. So I joke that it took us $1.5 million to go from the left to the right, right? Because it's a lot harder to develop simple programming languages that are expressive than complicated ones. So I'll give you a sense of analytics. We launched in 2014, and we have over 20 million users all over the world, 55 million projects created, and almost 2 million projects shared, and 75 million projects edited. That's what I really like. The fact that means that children come back to their projects and they revise. Remember the engineering design cycle, the coding process that we talk about? They're doing it. And we have a community of volunteer translators who have translated into any language. It doesn't require language, so it's graphical, but there's a few issues. So it's a volunteer, it's wonderful. And we had an agreement with PBS that a few years ago launched a PBS Scratch Junior Kids, so you could use their cartoon characters for your characters. So analytics, we are all over the world, really all over the world, except 7% of the countries, which is, you can imagine which countries. And yeah, it's all over. And when you're learning Scratch Junior, this is how it looks like. It's slow because your motor skills are hard and it takes you a really long time to program. However, once you become an expert by 2nd grade, you can do these kinds of projects. This is a multiple tablet project, so it's a classroom that combined multiple tablets, so children had to coordinate with each other. Okay, so you get the idea. So it really has a lot of potential, and you can do all of that with just those simple commands. This is all there is for Scratch Junior. These are all your commands, because the creativity is on the child's part, and that's why it's a playground. And if you think about it, just like language, I don't know, English has 20 something letters, Spanish has 20 others, but you can create, full books with lots of different combinations. So it's the same with programming languages. So in terms of research, what are we doing with Scratch Junior? We work one-on-one with children, where we are looking at something we call coding stages to see developmentally what stage they are. I'll talk about this a little bit later. We also have been doing in the past an NSF-funded project where we look at older students, university students who program with Python and who program with Scratch Junior, and see if the same areas of the brain activate. And we just published a paper about that. So, happy to, it's linked from my website. We also do a lot of work in classrooms to see how you can best teach pedagogical approaches, and with teachers, professional development. And I wanted to share these slides with you because I think it's interesting. We look at the numbers of projects and what happened between the difference between this last year, that was the first year of the pandemic, versus the year before when they were using Scratch Junior regularly. And what we see, so the yellow line is the year of the pandemic, 2020, and the orange line is the year before. And you could see that Scratch Junior has really, really increased. The number of projects created, the number of projects edited, and the number of projects shared, which is quite interesting. Now we're doing some research to analyze if this is related to the districts and if the districts provided technology for home use, or if it's not. And we're also looking at socioeconomics data. But finally, and this is the last thing I'll share with you, is the current project we're working. So last year I got a Department of Education grant to focus on Scratch Junior, how we can create a sustainable professional development model and curriculum implementation and look at student outcomes. And so we developed this coding as another language curriculum. Here's the website. You are invited to come play with it, take a look. It's for kindergarten, first and second grade. It is aligned with English language and math and computer science frameworks. It's 24 lessons of 45 minutes each. Has warm-up games, songs, movement, unplug activities, and guide for teachers, and their embedded assessments. And it's based on books, and they have both a fiction book, per grade. They're different, and children had to create a project retelling the story and changing the end. And also there's a book about a famous woman in computer science. And children learn about this woman and then come up with imaginary questions and things like that they create with Scratch Junior. So here is a footage from a kid that was recreating the story with Scratch Junior that he just read in a hybrid classroom. And he's showing you, he's very proud of his project, of how it's moving. He recreated Wild Rumpus that was happening, and now he's showing to his friends, to all of them, how it works. So, and this is a classroom, actually, it's in Argentina, that it was happening virtually. So they were teaching Scratch Junior and the Cal curriculum, but through Zoom. And it was fascinating. We're analyzing this data now, and it's just fascinating how they were able to teach a whole curriculum through Zoom only with 5-year-olds from their homes. So in terms of the research and the grant and the things, this is only the first year. So I don't have a lot of data to report to you, but I wanted to show you the different components of the grant and how it works, and give you a sense of the assessments that we're using, because there are not a lot of validated assessments in computer science. So we had to develop our own, and we'll be happy to share and have other people use them as well. So we're using TechCheck that we developed, my student Emily Relkin, which is really focusing on computational thinking. We are using coding stages, which is language specific, either for Kibo or for Scratch Junior. And then we're looking at the projects created by the kids. But we need these three because the projects are usually done in groups, but TechCheck and coding stages is individual. So we really need to triangulate. So TechCheck is a measure that you can use with control groups. So it measures computational thinking without so that means if you have a control group that has not been exposed, you can also give this assessment. And it's been validated, and people are using it in Spain and other places. And then for coding, we have developed this model of coding stages, following very closely all of the research on reading stages and writing stages that over the years in the 60s were developed. And so we start with the emergent, and we go all the way coding and decoding, fluency, new knowledge, and purposefulness, which is when you really can express. If you notice, purposefulness is around, because at each stage you have a sense of purposefulness, but it fully at the end. And so children, hopefully, as they progress through the curriculum, they move through the stages. They might not all get to the end stage, but that's the goal. I wanted to share just some, we have a CSA, is the coding stages assessment that we do before and after the curriculum. We started to analyze data as we speak. This is, the first pilots are happening right now. This is just a very small sample, but you could see that there is change between pre and post, both in teachers and students. You can also see that students, right, so the teachers, which are, they start higher, right, because it's a program developed for young kids. So of course, a teacher that doesn't know anything will be able to start at a higher stage than the child. And what you're seeing here is what you really need to focus is where it's going. If it's going to the left or it's going to the right, you see that as they progress, you see more, it's moving to the right after the experience. And then the other thing we're doing is we're looking at the projects themselves that children created. My student AIM created this project rubric for us to analyze the projects done by the children themselves. So we look at coding concepts and also ideas that had to do with how the project was designed and the creativity. And so let me give you two examples. So we have Luna's project and Joaquin's project. So Luna's project is like this. She's recreating the story of the boy that on the Wild Rumpus, forgot the boy. Yeah, forgot the name of that book. But so it's a boy that takes a boat and goes sailing, right? And so she recreated. They read the story and they recreated here. It's very simple. And then, so she scored it using the rubric. It was 23 out of 40, so 58. And when this child was during the CSA assessment, it was in stage 2. And then you have another example, Joaquin, and his project is a lot more complicated. It has different pages. He's more creative, but also his looping is a lot more interesting. And his total project score is 29 out of 40, 73% completion. And he's on the stage 3, so fluency stage. And so this is kind of how we are looking. I just wanted to give you a sense of the kind of research we're doing with this. We don't, if I come back in 2 years, I'll have the full data to share with you. But that's with that, I'm gonna end the stop sharing, and then we can open it up for questions and all of that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for that talk. That was so exciting. I just love seeing the kids light up when they are showing off their projects. It's like so inspiring. So yeah, I'll give folks a minute or two to formulate questions. Please use the Q&A feature if you can. It's just easier to keep track of than the chat. But while folks are, and again, if you're a student, please indicate that so I know when I'm reading it. But we do have a couple questions already to get us started, and other people can continue to add to the chat. Um, so the first question is from Mirav, and as it says, as a PhD student and a mom of 3 young kids, I keep looking for new fun technology coding games to expose my children, maybe because I like them so much. I relate very much to the idea of a playground. And recently, I think I did find a coding playground. But unfortunately, it's still very hard to keep kids engaged for more than 15, 20 minutes. It always requires that I will propose the play. Do you think it's because the setup is still needed to be preschool or other friends in a similar age, or similar outcomes can be achieved at home? Uh, or what else is missing?
Yeah, so Merav, you should know that the average time all over the world of usage of Scratch Junior is 15 minutes. So what you actually found is what we found by looking at data from all over the world. And I don't know if it has to do with attention span. I think it has to do because when children are playing with Kibo, which is on the floor and it involves their movement and physical, it's a lot longer than 15 minutes. So I think it has to do with how much attention they can devote to a screen. But we haven't confirmed that. But what you found, 15, 20 minutes, is what we found as well in the classroom as well. So even our curriculum, screen time is limited to 15 minutes at the time. Then the curriculum is 45 minutes, but what they do in those 45 minutes is only 15 minutes of screen time.
Wonderful. Okay, so our next question, another student question. This is from Allison Starks, one of our PhD students. She says, what are some key contextual factors or resources for moving towards coding as a playground mindsets in K-12 schools?
Well, that's a great question. I think the mindset, I like that you're talking about mindsets. First is to really understand early childhood. And part of what I see happening is a lot of people who are bringing computer science because they started with a high school. That's usually the first door, where computer science made into school. It was high schools. And so then it's very hard to learn that in early childhood, you don't learn the same way. And so when they bring computer science or they bring engineering, they just copy it down without really starting the other way. So I actually, when I have a choice, I said to the computer science specialist, no, thank you. I'll just work directly with your kindergarten classrooms first, or your art teachers. Send me your art teacher, because those, or your dance teacher, because with them it's a lot easier to teach the technology, because it's a technology designed for young children. They will learn it fast, but the pedagogical mindset, they already have it, right? Early childhood teachers are used to learn and to teach through play, when computer science teachers are not. So I think it's really understand. I would say for me, how do you bring it to schools, and maybe inviting players that are not the traditional players when you think about computer science.
Wonderful. Okay, we have another student question in the chat. Um, Says, how do we get the current generation of teachers to incorporate old versus new teaching techniques? There are many teachers that strongly dislike technology. How do we bridge the two learning styles?
Yeah, so that is a very interesting question. So we did research, my student Dylan Portland, a couple of years ago with Melissa Lee, and we work in Lexington, Massachusetts, which is a suburb here, and was the beginning of Scratch Junior. So we were testing it out and in a bunch of schools. And we had teachers who were what we would call old teachers, right? Who were, maybe not necessarily old in age, but who had been teaching for a really long time. So let's call them old teachers in that sense, and then the younger ones that just graduated. And so the what we all thought is, well, the younger ones are going to catch it earlier because they like technology. They were open to the technology. And actually, the data show exactly the opposite. What happened was that these young teachers or less experienced teachers had less experience managing a kindergarten classroom. So they spend all their time in classroom manager, while the most experienced teachers, although they might not like the technology, once they understood it was like art, the association was, this is like making art. It's not like doing math, it's making art. And they immediately caught with it. And actually, the student learning outcomes were much better in those classrooms. So that proved almost the opposite of. I think the key to your question is really tapping into teachers' passions. and showing them that they can do it, and they can do it with the content that they care about. So all of our curriculum, that's why it's books, that's why it's dancing. So teachers also can replace the books with books, their favorite books. We just show them how to choose the books.
Wonderful. Okay, we have two like quick clarification. First of all, several people have asked, will they be able to access this presentation? And yeah, we will be sharing recording, and also I recommend checking out Dr. Burr's website, as she has all the resources, you know, and papers.
All the videos that you see, you can find them on my website. So you can find them there. And a lot more. There's hundreds of videos.
And then also we have a question in the chat from Yvonne wanting to know if there's any work in Scratch Junior in the Caribbean islands.
So that's very interesting. We know that it's used in the Caribbean islands. And actually, 2 months ago, I gave a presentation. Jamaica put together a commission for revising their early childhood. And I was invited to talk to it was a presidential commission. And so I was invited to share with them all the work. And so I'm not sure if they're going to do it or not, but I know they're thinking about that. But I know if you look at Google Analytics, it is used in the Caribbean. I don't know by whom, but it is used.
I have a question about Kibo and the robots, and you mentioned that you know, that's more expensive because it's a physical robot, and that Scratch Junior, it looks like dissemination has been easier with Scratch Junior because it's free, and you know, and it's just online. And so I mean, is it a goal? You said if you mass produced it, it would be cheaper and more accessible. I assume there's barriers to that mass production. It's probably is a whole nother job, a full-time job for somebody. And, you know, as a researcher, you have lots of stuff to do. But I don't know, do you have thoughts of just this idea of like the work that we produce and how much are we responsible for dissemination when we have, you know, great ideas, and what are the trade-offs, and what are people trying to take, you know, change the product, or I don't like, just any
Yeah,
thoughts?
no, it is a very, and I learned a lot about this because again, I didn't know much and I had to learn. Um, what happens is you need money to do that. If you need money, you do need a venture capitalist. And so we had several meetings with them because we needed money besides the NSF big grant that we got for the company, because not the grant for the research, the grant for the company. And VCs would always say the same. Oh, this is it's a very complex product. Just simplify, get rid of the wooden blocks, just have it built in, get rid of the modules, because it's expensive, right? This product is expensive. So they say, just create something simple, which of course it will reduce the price to half. But then I made a decision, and luckily the CEO of the company agreed with me. I said, look, I don't want to, we tested all of these. We did years of research in the best possible. And I'm not interested to just change the pedagogical idea so it could sell better. And I made a decision, I don't know if it was the right or the wrong decision, to just, respect what we learn in the research and not make a cheaper product. So that reduces, we do have an investor who believed in an ideas, but it's an investor that you don't find really that it's someone who say, okay, I'm never gonna make money with you guys, but I like the idea and I will support it as I can, right?
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, last question, because we only have about a minute left. It's a student question, and they're asking about what kind of research or studies do you do on the design process?
Okay, so my student now, she graduated, Amanda Strohacker. She actually took the design process into the world of bioengineering and look at what an ethical design process. And if you're interested, you could look into her thesis is linked from our website. And right now also Amanda is working as my associate director for the early childhood technology program. This is a program we have that's online, and so she's the one that has focused the most on it lately.
Wonderful. Okay, perfect timing. First, I just want to again extend a huge thank you from our UCI School of Ed community for coming and sharing your work. It's been so exciting to listen to, and really inspiring in terms of like the the impact of our work and seeing it, being taken up and used by kids. And I find it extremely inspiring. So a huge thank you from all of us. And I know there was a lot of interest and excitement. And also make a plug for people who are available. We're going to be doing some student flash talks on Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. West Coast time. So we're going to have a couple students present ongoing projects to Dr. Bers, and she's going to be engaging with our community, on that intellectual level. And so folks should come by to that if you're free. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us.
Great. Thank you.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye.